With approval of the agenda, 2.1 will be changes to agenda and approval of the agenda. And we do have one change on the consent agenda, added item 8.19, appropriation of District 5 School Board member capital outlay funds to Niceville High School for band instruments in the amount of $24,782. And then we'll move on down to recognitions. We have 3.1, recognition of Lexi Lucas, Baker School 2021 Florida High School Athletic Association Division 1A Girls State Champion in the 119 weightlifting class. And then we'll move down to section 3.2, recognition of Trey Wainwright, Niceville High School, named 2020 Florida Mr. Football by the Dairy Farmers Incorporated and the Florida Athletic Coaches Association. And then 3.3, recognition of Niceville High School varsity cheerleaders as the 2020-2021 Florida High School competitive cheerleading state champions in Class 1A large all-girl varsity division. So on Monday night, we'll continue the Baker recognitions and then move over to the Niceville recognitions. So,
Keeping it ready.
yeah. So we have no visitors at this time, no personnel appointments, public comment. This is the 4-minute version of public comment. And then we are down to committee and staff reports. 7.1, in-county travel paid for the period of February 19th through March 3rd, 2021. And then 7.2, Okaloosa County District School Board audited financial statements for fiscal year ended June 30, 2020.
I have a comment on that.
Okay.
Again, I'm so impressed with our CFO. I can't even talk about it because, she's leaving us. But I'm glad Ms. Perry's here. But I just want to thank you for all the work you and the finance people do. And you make this part so easy because it's always clean. It's always right there. And thank you for doing that, Ms. Scallon. And please express that to those who work in your office too, because what a great report this was.
Yes.
And I bet she's relieved it's the last report.
You're checking them off, right?
And I appreciate that. However, it's a team effort. It's the program managers of federal projects and all staff across the district. So it's a team effort.
Yeah, well, we thank them because it's a wonderful report, and I'm sure it doesn't go that way for every district, but ours does.
And I appreciate those remarks, Ms. Van Check, and just to add that anytime you get a result like this, when a school district's budget approximates $400 million, and then if you start to include all the school funds and internal funds, it's an astronomical amount of money. And to score this highly
Yes.
is certainly commendable. So I echo what you say. Thank you, Mrs. Scallon, and your team.
And just to be on the one side about the audits here, she's actually in the process of beginning another one. So,
Yep.
but the good thing is that she won't be there for the end of it. So, but we did have a nice conversation the other day with state officials getting ready for the next one. So, but I could see the smile on Rita's face, like, well,
Checking them off, yeah.
It'll still have her name on it, though.
Yes.
Her thumbprints will be all over it.
And we've all seen how that works.
Yes.
The new one.
Okay, so item 7.3, out of the request of Dr. White, we have a Safe Schools update, and Mr. Dean, or Mr. Horton?
Thanks, Mr. Bryant. Yes, sir, at the request of Dr. White from the last meeting, we're happy to have Danny Dean come and give an update, and he's kind of vetted the information he's going to provide today through Mr. McGinnis, so we're keeping the things that need to be kept behind the scenes in terms of specific safety items, and so those are always available for board members individually. But Danny will come up, and I did want to just say, because I've been a part of this and watched this for the last few years, it is unquestioned that this particular board and this superintendent have focused on and spent more funds wisely, I would say, in the area of student safety than any school board or superintendent at any other time. And so that is without dispute, and I think that we're lucky to have Mr. Dean here, who runs our Office of Safe Schools and does a very good job and stays on top of the legislation, the not only just legislation, but the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas report and findings and recommendations, because I think we as a school district embrace those recommendations as well, even if they're not in statute, to try to provide the safest environment for our students and staff. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dean, who'll give you a briefing and then be available for any questions, but we thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, while he approaches, may I
Yes, sir.
make a comment?
Of course.
I asked for this because it's something that I'm frequently asked about in the public. And quite frankly, while I might have a kind of an overview of where we are, I know that our experts, Mr. Dean and Mr. Horton and the superintendent and his staff can certainly provide a lot more detail. And in the future, when I'm asked about it, all I'll have to do is point them to this video.
Good morning, and thank you. School safety has evolved dramatically over recent years in response to the increasing number of active assailant incidents on school campuses nationwide. In response to the tragic events that unfolded on February 14th, 2018 at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, numerous legislative requirements to improve school safety were imposed upon Florida school districts, most notably those that are collectively referred to as the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Act. I'd like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present the status and the exceptional progress of our many district-wide Safe Schools initiatives this morning. While school safety has consistently been a priority of the Okaloosa County School District, as evidenced by contractual agreements with the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office that provided school resource officers in all K-12 public schools in Okaloosa County years prior to the Parkland incident, substantial advances in school safety to ensure safer, stronger schools have been made in recent years and in record time since 2018 under the leadership of Superintendent of Schools, the Honorable Marcus Chambers, and you, the honorable members of this board. Not only as your district safe school specialist, but also as a product of the Okaloosa County School District and a parent of a child attending Okaloosa County schools, I thank you for your profound commitment to the safety of our schools as a top priority in Okaloosa County. Although our district has established an Office of Safe Schools responsible for the guidance and oversight on all matters of safety, security, and emergency management, I would like to highlight the fact that the accomplishments of this district in school safety could not have been so readily achieved or rapidly attained had it not been for the tireless effort, overwhelming support, and flexibility of our outstanding staff from across the district, as well as the partnerships with our public safety agencies. Though the list is far from exhaustive, I would also like to especially thank our directors from facilities, student services, technology, and our school-based administrators. It can also not be overstated that our progress has been made in concert with the support and recommendations of the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office. Our award-winning School Resource Officer program is recognized at both the state and national level, having twice achieved the Florida Association of School Resource Officers Agency of the Year, as well as the National Association of School Resource Officers Model Agency Award, among many other individual SRO awards. Again, in 2020, our SRO program was recognized at the state level with the presentation of SRO of the Year to Deputy Jerry Hooks of Choctawhatchee High School and the Lifetime Achievement Award to Captain Gary Venuti, present here this morning, Commander, Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office, Youth Services Division. Our Safe Schools initiatives are based upon the foundational 5 phases of emergency management: prevention, preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. We are continuing our school hardening and physical security efforts and are ahead of schedule for district-wide implementation. In accordance with Florida statute, threat assessment teams in each school are trained in the assessment and response to threatening or aberrant behavior. Standardized statewide comprehensive student threat assessment guidelines are used by all public schools to address early identification, evaluation, early intervention, and student support that also includes mental health referrals. We have employed a digital platform to enhance these capabilities through case management as well as analytics. We have enhanced our communication systems to provide campus-wide coverage and functionality to include mass notification as well as enhancements to the capabilities of our video surveillance systems. Even during this pandemic, our schools have been able to maintain an all-hazards approach to readiness through drills and exercises in accordance with both Florida statute as well as the directives from the State Fire Marshal's Office regarding social distancing during drills. We have implemented redundancy with our mass notification capabilities to ensure fail-safes and campus-wide notification for crisis response. We have adopted research-based, nationally recognized standard response protocols by which our students, faculty, and staff are all trained in for crisis response. In cooperation with the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office, the district is continuing use of its established Coach Aaron Feist Guardian program. We have established a deployable district reunification team for family reunification to support the recovery efforts of any school crisis. Again, we have adopted a research-based, nationally recognized standard reunification method, and the Florida Department of Education's Office of Safe Schools is quoted as saying, Okaloosa County's reunification plan is stellar. The Florida Department of Education's Office of Safe Schools has also been tasked with conducting compliance monitoring visits with schools to assess district compliance with statutory requirements. Several such visits have already been conducted at schools throughout our district. These visits are intentionally unannounced to the school to ensure the integrity of the assessment. I am pleased to report that our district meets or exceeds all safe school statutory requirements. Our best practices are consistent with those recommended by the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Commission, and many have been shared with other districts across the state as model applications in school safety. Thank you for your time this morning.
Any questions or comments?
Just appreciate it. I have noticed all of the activity at the campuses, the single point of entry and the fencing, and it's looking good. Thank you.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr.
Well, I had just a couple of things,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir,
and,
Dr. White.
Superintendent. I really appreciate what you've shared with us, and certainly all the accolades. That certainly feels good to know that we are being recognized for all those things. When you talked about communications, enhancing our communications, and I know the attorney's giving me the close look about what I say about communications, but I think it's safe to say that we have enhanced those communications within our schools in coordination with law enforcement. And I think that the public ought to know that. I well remember the days when we walked around carrying little tiny radios that we'd be lucky if I could get out to the PE field. And I think that we certainly have improved our radio communications. Is that right, Mr. Dean?
Yes, sir. Without getting into the specifics of the type of systems
Right.
that we use to improve
Right.
those, the priority was to ensure that we have campus-wide coverage, as you mentioned, from PE field and things like that, campus-wide coverage at all of our schools, and that the functionality of those systems in place.
Exactly. And I certainly appreciate that. And board members, those of you that were here then, I well remember when Sheriff Gugliani and Sheriff Ashley had that meeting for us, and they showed the video from Parkland, and all the different kinds of issues and all the kinds of problems that was experienced during that. And from that we learned of all the kind of things we need to do. And for example, when we talk about communications, certainly I appreciate, and I know you do too, colleagues, the Okaloosa County Commissioners joining with us as partners in funding some of those improvements. And that was critical, because that was well before the citizens voted to support us with a 50-cent sales tax. The county commissioners did that of their own volition, along with the sheriff, and that was really important, and that's an example of cooperation and teamwork that I think has served us well. You also mentioned mental health, and along those lines, what I know I can point out, because it's out in the public domain, that if citizens would go to Florida Department of Education and take a look at the Office of Safe Schools, they run down the list of all the kinds of things that are included in having safe schools. And Mr. Dean alluded to that when he spoke about best practices, because those too are located there. One of the things I know that we can talk about is when we do a drive-by by our schools now. They look different. And that's because we take safety very seriously. I know that Dr. Kelly and her committee, they're looking at some more enhancements along those lines. But the fact that now our schools have fences to protect our students and protect our faculties and staff and to protect our visitors, I think is very important. And I know, Mr. Dean, that in your area, primarily we focus on student safety and safe schools and those kinds of things. But I do have another request for information,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bryant, that does sort of pertain to safe schools, but in a different kind of way. And I'll save that request a little bit until later on. I know I can sense the excitement on the superintendent's face when I ask for these things, but I'll save that for later when we come to board members' business. But I appreciate you, Mr. Dean. You don't know how much. I was a principal before we had school resource officers, and I well remember when that man in the back, that's now a captain, visited my school with an incident, and I was so glad when he showed up. Because it was a very intense situation. And that was before we had school resource officers. And I can tell you, that's one of the greatest things that's ever happened to this school district. And that's from a principal's perspective that knows what it was like before we had them. But in any case, thank you for everything you're doing and keeping our schools, our teachers, our faculty, our staffs, parents, visitors, all safe very much.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
And I also have one quick comment too, Mr. Dean, but going back to what Dr. White said, because both him and I were on the board at that time, and it was awesome to see how Sheriff Ashley was here at the next board meeting offering what they can do to help and making things happen. And I can tell you just from my talks around the state with fellow school board members, we were in a unique position to where we had the cooperation not only from the sheriff's department, from the county commissioners. It was amazing how fast we were able to put things in place because we already had a lot of those things in place, but to get the support needed. And I can tell you to this day, you got counties out there that are still struggling to have that bond with their sheriff's department, their county commissioners, their local elected entities. And but in Okaloosa County, I'm very proud of, like Dr. White said, of how we came together as a team and put politics aside and did what was right for the schools. And look what happened 3 years later. I mean, it's awesome what we've accomplished.
And we have some other counties that are partners with us now. And you mentioned the Guardian program, and you know, Mr. Bryant, you were there, and you and I voted for this. In fact, the vote was 5-0 to have the Guardian program. There are now 43 counties in Florida that have the Guardian program. And when we did it, I think we might have been the Lone Ranger. But now we have 43 teammates, and I think our schools are a lot safer because of it.
Well, and can I just say a shout out and thank you for everything and that has been put in place, but also our employees. They went through additional training.
Absolutely.
And some of this was even on their own time. So not
Yes,
only
ma'am.
did we put in the objects that you can see, but behind the scene, those teachers, employees went through a lot of additional training so they could also learn to be and have that watchful eye.
Yes, ma'am.
To keep us all safe. So thank you to our employees.
All right.
And Mr. Bryant.
Yes, Mr. Chambers.
And Mr. Dean, he alluded to the fact that I think safety has always been a priority in this school district. But I do want to say what Mr. Dean has done in this role and the enhancements that he's made to safety. We also now have a district-wide safety comprehensive plan that he's worked with staff to create. So I just couldn't be prouder of the work that he does. Takes it very seriously. And then, of course, we also talked about how there's a certain gentleman sitting in the back. We have Captain Venuti back there who has always been there for this school district.
Can we have him
Former-
come up a minute? He loves that, and that's why I'm doing that. Because he loves to come up and get on camera. I know this about him.
She's saying that facetiously now.
Right.
I
Yeah,
see
he's
him
a-
red.
he's a
He was red. I
camera
used to see him
hog.
glowing from the back of the room when you called him.
Look,
Go ahead.
You know, it's my last little bit of time, so my last 4 months, but I can tell you I grew up in the school district, not only as a police officer, but some of my best friends. So I appreciate the honor.
Yeah. Well, and I just, Captain Venuti knows me very well. We work together, and in all disclosure, I taught his son, who was one of the best sports writers I ever had as a journalism teacher, and Sam's doing very well now. But I didn't know if we'd have another opportunity to have you up here, so I didn't want to miss it. But what you've done with that SRO program, and I, like Dr. White and several of us, we remember when that didn't happen, and we were going on bomb threats with a bullhorn, and that was our. You remember that, and everything. But under your leadership, that program, obviously is a one that is modeled after and continues to be good and to your direction and along with Mr. Dean there. But Captain Venuti, you've really made a difference in not only our district, but I saw you change students' lives, and that's you can't get better than that.
It's all
Thank
about
you.
the team, so I appreciate the chance. Like I said, me and Mr. Chambers started together, you know, when he was a first-year teacher and I was the first time in school, scared to death of coming into a school. And it's
Wait, you were
been-
afraid to be in a school?
Oh, yeah. And so now, you know, some 20-something years later, that I look back and it's been the absolute best ride. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dean.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Dr. White, for Yeah.
requesting
That's
this
great.
information. Definitely a lot of great information in there. So now we'll move down to Section 8, Consent Agenda. 8.1 will be the approval of the consent agenda. 8.2, approval of the minutes of the workshop meeting of March 4th, 2021, minutes of regular meeting of March 8th, 2021. 8.3, reappropriation of District 1 School Board member capital outlay funds allocated to Meigs Middle School in Project 2364 in the amount of $212.18 to a new project to be used toward the purchase of a projector and mount. And 8.4, request to advertise a public hearing for adoption of a new job description for program director, data scientist, curriculum and instruction. 8.5, naming of schools, buildings, and other facilities, revised guidelines and procedures. 8.6, budget amendment number 6, fiscal year 2020 through 2021. 8.7, monthly financial statement for February 2021. 8.8, invoices to be approved for payment. 8.9 is school donations.
I'd just like to say a shout out to Cross Point Church for all of their huge checks that they are distributing in our school district to help various projects across the district. That's very meaningful and very much appreciated, as well as the numerous businesses and other associates that donate to help our schools survive and thrive. So just to let them know how much those are appreciated.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. 8.10, payroll warrant register and accounts payable warrant register for February 2021, totaling $26,631,271.66, and bank transfers for February 2021 totaling $125,000. 8.11, sole source purchase over $25,000, Manufacturing Solutions Industries Incorporated. 8.12, request to increase purchase order 21002643 to the Flooring Authority. 8.13, request for a price increase of ITB 18-07 custodial equipment and repair services district-wide. 8.14, ITB 21-09 band instruments Crestview High School. 8.15, ITB 21-10 band instruments Niceville High School.
I have a question on that. I just want a clarification. So I see that item for band instruments, and then I also see where you're, Dr. Kelly, you're asking for, for appropriation for band. I know we have a rotating band situation where we do instruments, so is your request just supplementing that other request? Do you know?
Yes, it is very much. On my understanding on the replacement rotation, that is a very minute amount when you consider the cost of those big band instruments, and when you have a band as large as Crestview's and Niceville's 350 band member, that really doesn't do justice. And in this case, they have held off on the rotation for some of those major instruments like the tubas.
Right.
And so they've waited now, and they really need these to go forward with their program.
Okay, great. I just was curious
Yeah.
that you're asking that it's getting there, so it goes together to get it all done. Thank you.
And to follow up on that, I believe the yearly contribution's like $50,000 or something like that. Is it?
It's
Yeah.
diminished, I believe, too, hasn't
Is
it,
it?
every year, over the time.
And as Ms. Scallon comes up, think as you probably remember, a number of years ago, that had completely gone away.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
actually brought it back and have actually increased, actually,
Okay.
that amount over the years.
Yes, it's, the band instrument, his allocation has been from capital outlay, and it's been consistent, and then there was an additional amount out of general fund to help with, like, sheet music and those kinds of curriculum type things, so
Right.
yes. So they get it from general fund, and the capital outlay's been consistent.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And I'd like to add.
Yes, sir,
if I might,
Dr. White.
that, knowing just a little bit about the band from a middle school perspective, that they self-fund. I mean, they self-generate the funds necessary to travel and do all the kinds of things they do. So any little bit of help
Yes.
that we can assist
Yeah.
with, that I know is very much appreciated, because in some cases, those bands are raising over $100,000 a year.
Right.
Just
And when they go
per
to
year.
competitions
That's
and
right.
they're in these parades and
Right.
that kind of thing, they make us look good.
Right.
And they certainly do. I can speak as a band parent as well. They do a lot towards the self-esteem
Right.
of students.
Mhm.
It gives students who might not be a soccer player or a football player or other things a niche to be in and a group of good students to travel with their high
That's right.
school and middle school years.
But I guess the point that I really wanted to make was that they pay their own way.
They do a lot.
And
They sure
this
do.
is just some assistance that we give in buying instruments, big instruments,
Yeah.
that are used for many years.
Right.
Okay, and of course, we change the mouthpieces and all that.
Plus, I'm sure that
Say.
we don't want to turn a student away because they don't have an instrument, so we try and, I'm sure, help with.
Particularly those that may cost thousands of dollars.
Right.
Right.
And how appropriate also, since it is Music and Education Month.
Yeah.
We just throw that in
Yeah,
there.
that's right, it is.
And I have to get a giggle out of some of the masks with the slits.
Yep.
But for District
They
1,
do.
before I get all the letters for band assistance, the way that I do it is the letter comes through the principal.
Yes,
Yep.
and me too.
And
That's right.
so
Absolutely.
band directors should talk with the principal about their needs, and then
Right.
the principal, if they choose, can send me the letter, and certainly I'll be more than willing to help.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting, Dr. Kelly, you're talking about how it builds up self-esteem. Of course, I wasn't born and raised in Crestview. I didn't go to Crestview High School, even though I felt like I went to Crestview High School. But those folks that I know that are alumni of Crestview High School and the Big Red Machine, they are very proud of that to this day. They'll, you can look on social media, and all of them that were part of the Big Red Machine to this day will tell you that
yeah.
they were proud members of the Big
Once
Red
a
Machine.
bulldog,
Once a
always a
bulldog,
bulldog.
always a bulldog. And I
Yeah.
know that's probably the same for
We-
Niceville, Choctaw, Fort Walton, Baker.
We have a recent county commissioner that served as the president of the band boosters at Crestview High School. And he was in the Big Red Machine.
That's
That's
right.
right.
All right. Okay, so let's see. Let's go down to 8.16, tag-on bid purchase over $25,000. Train. Always like to see those because that means air conditioning and all the good stuff. Especially Baker and Crestview are getting new chillers and new. That's great to see. 8.17, multi-year purchase KUTA software. 8.18, course adoption for the 2020-2021 school year.
And I'll just say on that, if you looked at that closely, those courses support the Choctaw Aeronautics Program and the dual enrollment program, and those are some things that we have in our sights to promote us forward in the coming years, and so that gets us more up to date with that program.
Yeah. In our Rotary Club up in Crestview yesterday, we actually had Mario Worth, who's with the Shoe Foundation. We were actually talking about Choctaw High School and how important that aeronautics program is and how they're bringing it up to the north end. So kudos to Choctaw High School for leading the way and to have it like Dr. Shoe helping us be able to
Absolutely.
have that happen. So. All right, so we are now to 8.19. This is the added-on item, appropriation of District 5 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Niceville High School for band instruments in the amount of $24,782. And now we're down to Superintendent's Human Resource Recommendations, 9.1, Employees on Administrative Leave, 9.2, Deferred Retirement Option Program, the drop. The first two will be informational only on Monday. 9.3, out-of-field report for the 2020 through 2021 school year. 9.4, employment separations. 9.5, personnel recommendations. 9.6, employee transfers. 9.7, reinstatement reimbursement of sick leave due to line of duty illness, injury, medical examination. And then finally, 9.8, leave without pay. Section 10, discussion agenda, items moved from the consent agenda. At this time, we have none. And so we're down to section 11. And Dr. Kelly, I will turn it over to you, ma'am.
And we gave a full report last time. We meet monthly, so our next meeting will be the first Monday in April. And I'll have a better report for you at that time.
Well, thank you.
Looking forward to it.
And I will just say thank you for the glossary on the acronyms and
Yeah,
all that. That's
that
been
was good.
very helpful, so
Good. Thank you.
we need to make acronym for the glossary now.
That's right. What can we call it?
All right, so 11.2 will be an action item on Monday night. So program number 6, task order number 11, GMP district-wide sales tax roofing projects.
I think we about roofed everybody, right?
Well,
Yeah.
We should be
one
getting-
time I
should
could
be
have
getting
told you how
close.
many acres of roofing we have. You'll have to ask Bill, but we have several acres of building.
And I know
roof.
a lot of this was coming before even the sales tax piece, correct, Mr. Horton? That roofing has been a priority. We've seen it several times.
Well, yes, ma'am. We've always had a priority roofing list with our work with Jacobs Titan, but not always the capital funding to be able to do all of the
Right.
roofs. So the passage of the half-cent sales tax has got us expedited, and that's what you're seeing on this particular item is those roofs that are identified as most critically needed through half-cent sales tax projects. So I'm excited. They'll be done this year and ready for kids in the fall.
And roofing is expensive. That's
It-
what,
it is.
that's what
Yes,
I've
ma'am.
learned as a board member, how expensive it costs to put a roof on, so.
Big roofs.
Yes, big
Big
roofs. Like you said, a lot of acreage on that, but certainly very important, and certainly I'm not very versed in construction things, but you don't want to go in there and start cleaning up if your roof's leaking, so you want to make sure this is important, that we get this done first.
Yes, ma'am, and we do a competitive bid process through our
Right,
total
certainly.
program manager. The other thing that I would say is that you look at a campus like Mary Esther Elementary, I think I've been told there are 3 roofs on that building. And so the tear-off alone for that is extensive and has to happen in the summer when kids aren't there because it's going to be so noisy.
Yep.
But we're excited about it.
Plus reminding everybody that our buildings are old. They were built, a lot of them in the 60s, so it was a different time of construction and the way things were done, so tearing them apart is hard.
Yes, ma'am.
Fingers crossed we don't have any storms this year.
I know.
Everything is,
Get it done before hurricane season.
absolutely.
So now we'll move down to section 12, information technology seat management contract. And again, this will be an action item. 12.1, CACI task order number 2-187 for Edwards Elementary School locking hardware. And I know Ms. Morris and her team are really excited to have this at her school. So now we'll move down to Mr. McInnes's business.
Just an update, we are working with departments on the first 5 chapters of your policy manual. Those are the chapters that are up for review this year. And so those are moving along, and we'll begin bringing those to the board in the next few months as they are ready for your review and approval.
Okay. All right, so now we'll move down to section 14, and Mr. Chambers, I will turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant and Board. First, I want to start off by saying I want to thank Ms. Ivanchek. As you know, she came to me a couple weeks ago and said, hey, what do you think about having some conversations with some students? And I'm going to be brief because I know she'll also talk about this. But we had a great day last Friday speaking with the students at Baker regarding this past year dealing with COVID. And I do want to say the teacher did an absolutely great job helping this get established. Mr. Martello, fantastic setup. And I'll leave some more of the specifics for Ms. Ivanchek, but just a fantastic event. I want to continue to give you updated information on COVID. I think, as you know, as we receive information each day, we're still seeing lower numbers of positive cases that are occurring throughout the district. In essence, probably right around, on average, about 3 cases a day, which we'd love to have 0. But that number, as you know, was a lot more a month ago, 2 months ago. So just wanted to give that information. 22 of our schools, in the most recent information, 22 of our schools reported 0 student or staff cases, which is about 58% of our schools. 29 reported 1 or fewer. So still something that we'd like to see. Also, As a result of less cases, obviously, there's a result of less quarantine occurring, so less contact tracing occurring. And we know that's something that's a benefit to students. That's less time out of school. It's less time going through that process. So that's also a nice benefit to these lower numbers. We have to date about, when you look cumulatively across the year, we're at about 95.85% of our students have not been positive. So just a little over 4% have been positive from September to our most recent information. And then, as you know, we've been more and more employees who choose are getting vaccinated. As you know, Mr. Horton came up last board meeting and explained that this past Saturday was going to be a quarantine day at, it was going to be a vaccination day at Niceville High School. We had about 400 opportunities for vaccinations. I think we had approximately 142 individuals show up to get the Johnson & Johnson vaccination. So that's 142 more individuals vaccinated throughout the district of those who choose to do so. So that was a good event. I will say, bless Mr. Horton, Ms. Schroeder, Dr. Chapman, because we kind of got information. I'll say it this way, information was clear on Thursday afternoon regarding Saturday's vaccination. So we were able to pull that together pretty quickly. So I do appreciate the work of everyone involved in getting that information out to our employees, but successful day. As you know, opportunities continue to exist for vaccinations for all employees right now. And even as recently as yesterday, I have some others, pharmacies even reaching out saying, hey, how can we help be vaccination partners even if we have to come to your school? Now, we have to kind of look into that, so we will be looking into that, how we can do that safely. But I think the more opportunities we provide our employees in ways that I think might be more accessible, I think that's a good thing for those who choose to get vaccinated. So that's just a little bit of information on COVID. Wanted to also give you just a continued update on the half-cent sales tax, which we're, as you know, we're all very excited about that. Right now, you know, right now we have the pre-GMP that's out for our cafeterias, classroom additions, or whether it be the multipurpose rooms. So Mr. Horton and staff right now are meeting with schools, going through that project. Principals are a part of this process because I think they're obviously important in terms of location, getting information, even athletic directors at the high school level as it pertains to multipurpose rooms. So going through that process right now. Also, as you know, and you kind of heard today, obviously, with Danny Dean here today, continuing that priority on safety projects. Whereas we were probably on a timeline to be probably about 3 years out, we will now, within 18 months, have all of our schools' safety projects completed. So that's something that I think that we're all proud of, and I appreciate that work. Also, you know, the GMP for the roof projects, like Dr. Kelly talked about, that's on this board, so we should get those going. I was having a conversation with a group this week, giving an update on Okaloosa schools, and we talked about the roofs. And sometimes you would think that individuals wouldn't be too excited about that, but they were very excited that we're finally getting roofs completed rather than do patchwork. So that was good to hear a little bit of that feedback. As you know, this upcoming Tuesday, March 23rd at 4, here in this room, we'll have our next Citizens Oversight group. I am excited that we've made some significant progress on our website. That's going to chronicle, you know, all things that will deal with this half-cent sales tax project. So the citizens group will get an overview of that website, and then we hope to be fully live with that website in the April timeframe. So a lot of work is going into that to make sure we're as transparent as we possibly can be, and just so individuals get good information about what is going on. So we hope that this will be a one-stop shop, so to speak, in terms of where people can go get information about the half-cent sales tax. Do want to let you know that we do have a parent survey that's about to go out. That parent survey will go out to both brick and mortar families as well as My School Online families. They'll actually click which one they are, and then depending on which one they are, there's some questions that might be different based on whether you were in the school building or whether you were in My School Online, which will give us some good information as well. As you know, at the last meeting, we talked about the importance of knowing which families might be coming back to brick and mortar for the 21-22 school year. So part of that survey will give up families an opportunity to declare, so to speak, their intent for the upcoming school year, which will give us needed information. As a reminder, about 90% of our students are back in the brick and mortar building. But 10%, as you know, of 32,000 is a big number. So having an understanding of that is important. This March, so we have our newsletter that will be going back out again, as you know, for our parents and employees. Catch the Wave, so we're excited about that. One of the things that will be embedded in this upcoming video will be some information about the Baker Town Hall meeting, and there'll actually be some video that that individuals can see if they choose to, just to see how that event went, as well as other bits of information. But very important will also be kindergarten registration reminder, as well as all new student enrollment reminders. So just continuing to get that information out, continuing to make sure that all those who would like to be in school next year are going to be in school next year. Do also want to give just a little bit of information on the Public Schools Foundation. As you know, Mrs. Gates leads that group, and she's done a remarkable job of, I'll say, even strengthening that group even more so. We have a lot more board members that are now part of this foundation. Ms. Vanchek's also a critical part of this group. However, the foundation has continued to support teachers through mini grants, and there's been about 40,000 where the foundation has matched that number with about 20,000 raised locally, and then that 20,000 matched. So these mini grants that go out to teachers are making it possible for them to do certain things in their classroom. So we just appreciate the foundation for that. The Take Stock program, we've received about 30 applications for 8th graders. And if you might remember, that number had gone down some. And so those numbers are going back up again. And I appreciate that work of the foundation. As you know, gives those students an opportunity to go to college where maybe they didn't necessarily have that opportunity. So this is a big deal for those students. And then lastly, I want to say, as you know, we have ESSER 1 funds, and those are part of those CARES Act dollars. But ESSER 1 funds came to us back in the summer, and we're spending those dollars down, and those dollars are in essence for the impact of the pandemic. But now there's ESSER 2 funds that are arriving, and a decent amount of money that is coming to the school district once allocated, and it's for our continued efforts in making sure that we, one, keep schools going safely, and two, make sure that we close the achievement gap. So this information is just come out. We have a deadline of April 12th to get our information in, but I want Mr. Horton just to come up and just kind of brief the board and the public in terms of these funds.
And I'll just follow up. I think Ms. Scallon has mentioned briefly with each of you about that, but I wanted to provide you, if you did not already have, a copy of Commissioner Corcoran's letter sent to superintendents, and also the summary page that shows allocations by school district. So there is a request, what's called a request for application, a process that we go through to receive these funds in the school district. There are federal funds that are being passed through the Department of Education. Yes, sir.
May I ask a question,
Mhm.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Are these the funds that were recently passed in the last couple of weeks, or are these funds from previous? Just curious.
And I will say these funds are from previous. This is not what was
All right.
passed in the last couple of
All right, very
weeks.
good.
And so that would be another situation down the road.
I understand.
And so what we have and received this, the first part of this week is the process by which to apply and for the funds and provide assurances and provide some budget information in terms of the use of these funds. So in general, in broad strokes, and before I say that, the Chancellor, Jacob Oliva of K-12 Public Schools, has said that there'll be a webinar that they'll put out to school districts. They have not announced the date of that yet, but it will be the first opportunity for us to hear the Department of Education's discussion of this particular group of set of funding, and also allow the districts to ask questions. So Commissioner Corcoran's letter to superintendents did provide some an overview and guidelines to this process, and I'll go over a couple of those with you today, but you have a copy of that letter now. And I think we'll learn much more about some specificity and some questions that we might have as we move into and have that webinar and prepare this. The statewide amount you'll see on that summary sheet is about $2.8 billion for school districts. The amount for Okaloosa, and it's a proportional based, FTE based allocation, is approximately $23 million. Of that amount, approximately $1 million would pass through to our public charter schools, and that would leave Okaloosa with approximately $22 million in this particular ESSER 2 round of funding. And so a few of the things that the Commissioner identified in this funding is encourage districts to do a number of things, and I want to highlight a couple of them. Continue to spend ESSER 1 funds before spending ESSER 2 funds. So ESSER 1 funds are the CARES Act funding that we got last year, that we were using to purchase things like desk barriers and PPE and some software. And Rita will share it at a certain point. I know a final accounting, but we know that we've already expended, at least allocated those funds, and have spent in the neighborhood of $800,000 to $900,000 from our own general revenue to cover COVID-related costs. So we've spent, and maybe not expended, but at least allocated, budgeted those expenditures. So one of the first things about this is the ESSER 2 funds can be used for authorized expenditures that occurred from any time March 13, 2020, when President Trump issued the pandemic. So it does give us the ability to go back and apply these funds to any expenditures that were funded with general revenue, which would seem to make sense at this time, because we want to make sure if these funds are earmarked for helping the school district through the pandemic, that we use these funds to the fullest and not the general revenue funds that we would otherwise use to hire teachers and pay those other normal operating costs of the school district. So that's the first thing that I wanted to just highlight for you. The other.
May I ask a question?
Yes,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And as I remember, and Mrs. Scallon will probably have to help me, and Mr. Horton, you too, that expenditure plan was something that the district brought forward to the school board. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
Yes.
in this case, you'll do the same.
Yes, sir.
Because budgetary items, as y'all know, is one of our duties and responsibilities. So I'll be very interested in seeing that budgetary plan and having an opportunity to look at that and study what your proposals are before I vote on it.
So the challenge being, obviously, it's an April 12th deadline, and we will be asking about that at the webinar as well, in terms of bringing it from the board. Now, obviously, with many of these types of funding pieces, there are opportunities for budget amendments when you move through the process, so that would be important for us as we learn more things and move into the summer and fall. So every flexibility that we can get in this funding, we'll want to make sure we have.
That's why in the old days, every accountant I knew used a pencil so they could amend it.
Okay, wait a minute. Can I
Answer.
ask something?
Yeah.
So you said it's due April 12th? We have to send a plan back in?
Well, the application is due April 12th, and I'll leave to Ms. Scallon to speak to the specifics of the details of it, but at some point, we'll have to provide a budget for what we're going to spend the money on.
And Dr. White, you're saying that would be something this board would have to approve before they submit it?
It's my understanding.
Well, I think that timeline's going to be kind of crazy in there, looking at our schedule. Has someone looked at that?
It will be. I whether we have a board meeting on April 12th or if it's before April 12th, which I think it is, you'd probably see that at that particular meeting.
And I would offer this, and this might be possible, and we might have to have the lawyer help us with this, and maybe even the DOE. It might be possible for you to submit a plan prior to our approval, but follow up
Yes, sir.
to require our
Okay.
approval.
That
We've
has
done
happened
that
in other
pending
situations.
Okay.
approval before.
Okay, good.
Grants I've written.
That's going to be tight.
The other two things that I wanted to mention about this, three things. They do advise that plan on using these funds to support pandemic-related needs and operations through at least the 2021-2022 school year. The law does permit these funds to be used through September of 2023, so just for planning purposes. And then the two other things that I want to make sure I say in the right way. We're advised to use these funds for any costs related to 2021-2022 enrollment counts in excess of our enrollment estimates for the upcoming year. So I'm going to translate that. If a district projected 1,000 students and actually 1,100 showed up, 100 more, then this notification is saying to plan on using these funds for any costs related to that extra 100 students. And again, there will be some questions in the webinar, but that's kind of an important statement, because typically what happens is if you project 1,000 students and an extra 1,100 show up, then when they count students in October and February, the district receives additional funding for those 100 students in some form or fashion. Sometimes it's not full funding, but it's some. So this is giving us, advising us that we need to think about these funds in that light. So the first thing in my mind and in Rita's mind is we would want to be conservative in our approach and plan for the possibility that there could be extra students coming above our predictions. I don't know that I think that at this point, but it would be wise to at least plan for it. The second thing that it says, that the letter said, was to monitor the 2021 legislative session in the event that there are temporary adjustments to districts' recurring appropriations in the 21-22 General Appropriations Act, which is the funding mechanism by which school districts get funded for the 21-22 school year. So they're just saying pay attention to the legislative session. And we've said all along we'll take a conservative approach to budgeting for next year and present a balanced budget. But these are just some things that are giving us the opportunity to consider the amount of these funds that are budgeted for items such as HVAC, additional HVAC upgrades and some other things that we've been using CARES Act for already. But I think it's prudent in some form or fashion to reserve some of this money to address these two items that I just mentioned, if that makes sense.
So what you were saying about the legislature, so essentially, now that they see this money's coming, they may take the other money and take some of that away?
I'm not going to speak for the legislature. I'm not going to speak for the Commissioner of Education.
that-
I'm just
that's
going to,
the
I'm just
general
looking at what that
MO.
statement says.
That often happens. And then what about some monies I saw yesterday in a brief about coming from the federal?
These are federal dollars here. They're pass-through dollars, so this is federal funding, ESSER II funding.
But isn't there another act that's?
An American Rescue Act
Yes,
that I
that-
spoke of about
that-
2 months ago.
Yeah,
That's all
yeah.
right.
That's right. Isn't, you know about how that will affect this, or is that apples and oranges?
I think it's separate from this,
Yeah.
and so.
It is.
And may I
yeah.
interject?
Yes, sir, of
And
course.
Yesterday, when Mrs. Scallon called me about the items on the agenda pertaining to her, I made an inquiry about these funds, and her remarks parallel those of Mr. Horton. And board members, I'd just say you might want to talk with her to kind of get an idea of the kind of influx that we're receiving and some of the thoughts about how that money might be spent, and certainly Mr. Horton as well. But the two are in tandem, and that's the good news.
Anything else, board members? Steve?
I don't at this time, Webster, Superintendent will update you when we complete that webinar and throughout the process.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Horton.
Thank you.
Mr. Chambers?
And that's all I have. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. As always, great information. We appreciate your staff coming to us and giving us an update on these items. So we're now down to school board members' announcements and requests for information. And Dr. White, I'm just so excited about your request. I'm going to let you go first.
Teach me a lesson. Well, I just have a couple of things, and the first thing is I would like to publicly congratulate Dr. Paul Shue. Board members, you might have seen this, for his recent appointment to the University of West Florida Board of Trustees, appointed by Governor Ron DeSantis. That just occurred, and I know he is a very worthy person to be on that Board of Trustees and will do great work. The second thing I was going to talk about is exactly what Mr. Horton and Mrs. Scallon talked about, that this influx of funding, we're going to have a plan put together, and I appreciate very much the work you did there. And then the last item that I have pertains to another information request, and recently I have, and I know you have too, have had the opportunity to review a lot of different kinds of news reports, some of them on Channel 3, and yesterday there was even one on Good Morning America regarding the same incident concerning access to student records. And so I'm wondering, Mr. Chambers, if you might ask your staff, Mr. Horton or Mr. Mitchell, to come forward and maybe give some assurances to the board and to the public regarding who has access to electronic student records. In other words, how we might do passwords, how we might protect that student information so that we don't have a situation that replicates that occurred in Escambia County. And board members, I think you all know exactly what I'm talking about. So I think it would be very timely, Superintendent, if you might could come forward with that information so that we can let the public know that the steps we take within security provisions and all the things that the lawyer will want to advise us about as to who has access to what student records, electronically particularly. All right, and so that's what I have, Superintendent.
And we'll get right on that.
All right.
And I think on that particular incident, I did talk to a fellow school board member over in Escambia County, and that particular employee, it sounds like they basically gave the information to the daughter, and so yeah, that's very important that we figure.
Yeah, and in that situation, the reason it's so concerning to me is that individual worked at a different school center,
Right.
but yet had access to the student records at another site.
Exactly.
And I don't think that's uncommon. I think a lot of their MIS, as we call it, I think that was their Skyward or their Focus program that they used, that many districts in the state of Florida use and have been proponed to use by most of them.
Right.
Well,
But I
we'll
think
want to
that's
know
good-
about that.
Good
Yes, sir.
information
I
to
agree.
have. Thank
And
you.
the families and the parents and out in the community and the public, they'll want to know about that.
Right.
And there may even be some kind of audit trails that we use to track the access of that kind of information.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important for everyone to understand that, I mean, those folks they're being charged with felonies.
Yes.
Digital thumbprints are
Right.
important.
Right. All right, that's all I had.
Thank you, Dr. White, and that's a great request for information there. Dr. Kelly, we'll go to you.
I just have two. One is a follow-up to something the superintendent said, and I know that you and HR will be on it, but when we reference the online school options, and I know that there's one that the state is not supporting going forward, so we will not offer that. But just to be sure that our teachers who are instructing in those programs are aware early that those are going away, and so that they are provided options and information about going back into the classroom or going into other online avenues for the coming year. I know you'll be on that, but
Correct.
several have asked me about it, and I know even though we've spoken about it, maybe we need to highlight even with more diligence to them.
Okay.
And the second thing is a request if you wouldn't mind, of the superintendent's staff, if you think it's valuable, Mr. Chambers, because I have been asked about this, and it's on my mind too when we have incidences like we had this morning prior to our board workshop. Could the board be provided some statistics relevant to student referrals to alternative placements due to disciplinary actions recommended by the superintendent that the board votes upon? And I'm particularly talking about those alternative placements to the academy, the online, and other situations that we might have. I remember years and years and years ago, we had some kind of study related to that. And I just think in today's world, it would be important for us as we're taking those actions to understand better some of those statistics that we're sending students to, maybe even the recidivism rate there too, how
Gotcha.
we're doing with those students.
We'll get right on that as well.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else?
That's it.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you, Dr. Kelly. And Ms. Gardner, we'll go to you.
Thank you, but not at this time.
All right. And Ms. Vancheck?
Well, you know, Ms.
I'm going to
Vancheck.
give my time to Ms. Vancheck.
A couple things, yeah. First of all, I want to mention that we have some schools who are doing what I think is fantastic, which they are stocking a food pantry and a clothes closet. And some of these are student-driven projects, some are from the administration, and I just want to really commend them for these because it's allowing students to get some food items when they don't have them, and it's done in a respectful way where they're not embarrassed, and some that even need clothing. And so several schools, particularly on the high school level, have been doing that, and I appreciate that. Mr. Chambers mentioned Take Stock in Children, and I always want to say that we are continuing to look for mentors. So anyone in the public that thinks they could give up an hour a week to mentor a student, Mr. Bryant has been a mentor for a long time. I've been a mentor. It's very valuable. And with those 8th graders coming up, we need a lot of mentors for the next school year. So if you would contact the Take Stock in Children, just call the district and you can get that information or go online. That would be great. Also want to say to the public that, as we've kind of referenced, our legislature is in session, and education always is a big topic in the legislature, and a lot of things that affect not only the budgeting of our schools, but programs like the Bright Futures program is being looked at, and that affects a lot of students, so pay attention. And of course, I always want to say to use your right to speak out to your elected officials on those topics. And then the big event I want to mention, Mr. Chambers, I want to thank you because I know your time is your schedule is very tight. And when I came to you with my idea, you didn't miss a beat. You immediately said, yes, we want to talk to those students. It just so happened that we had that event on the 1 year, and I hate to use the word anniversary, but the 1 year date that we released last school year for spring break that basically never ended as far as that year. And it came to me in a meeting with Mr. Martello and some of the Baker students weeks before that we really hadn't had an opportunity to speak to students. We've talked with our employees and others about how the year's gone, but and he was very open, and I appreciate that because his administrative staff and along with Ms. Caraway, their teacher up there with leadership, they went to a lot of different things to get that lined up. They had it very well organized. It was in a town hall setting. The students were very respectful, and I do want to say that I think the superintendent and I made a pretty good team up there answering the questions. We were not versed on those questions before. We also got to turn the tables and ask them questions, but I know that he felt like I did, that they kept us on our toes. Board members, I want you to know they asked me what our job is. So I had to give them a description of exactly what do board members do. But they had the concerns that any high school student would have, which is, can we have a prom? And that is a big part of high school. To when do we get our lockers back? But other questions were a lot more, deep thought, in that they wanted to know about mental health counseling, a lot of things that they had some concerns about. And I thought it was a very good program to let those students be able to speak with us and for us to do that. And I do want to appreciate that we had some positive media coverage on that event, and I think it's a very good thing that we do need to listen to our students. And thank you, Mr. Superintendent, for taking me up on my idea and spending your time there. And he got, I have to say, he got hit with a lot more questions being in his position, which, and some of them I let him have. You got that right. And so, thank you, sir. And it was a great event. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anything?
I'm done. Thank you.
All right. Well, and I would just like to echo to Ms. Ivanchek there also for taking the opportunity to set up the town hall meeting. But it just goes to show you that this board is trying to always be proactive in doing things that are in the best interest of the school district. And we are fortunate that Mr. Chambers is willing to always be there for us and help us get the message across. And it was such a great idea that Crestview High School is going to do one in a couple of weeks.
Okay, great.
So we got it set up for April 9th. So I appreciate Mr. Chambers agreeing to do that. Mr. Day was all behind it. But I do want to thank you for setting it forward so we can have these, not just for Baker School, but for other schools. So,
Thank you.
So we look forward to doing that. It has been mentioned, a lot is going on in Tallahassee right now. It's happening so fast, it changes every day, it seems like. But a lot of education items on the docket there that we have to be aware of. So the first one is SB 86, which is the student financial aid. We were talking about Bright Futures. That item is, that particular bill is not agended for any other discussion yet, but that doesn't mean that's not going to happen. I know y'all, all of y'all have been bombarded by parents concerned about the Bright Futures. I will just tell you that we'll do our part to advocate, but parents, those that are concerned about this particular item, please let your elected person know, which in our case for Senator is George Gaynor and Doug Broxson, and our state representatives are J.R. Williamson and Judge Pat Maney. So please let them know that your feelings on that. I do have a request for information to Mr. McGinnis, and I apologize, I didn't forewarn you about this, but it just kind of came up in talking. But HJR 1461 is a proposed constitutional amendment that's floating out there regarding compensation for school boards. I would please ask if you could do some research on that and get back with board members on how that might affect if it does make it into on a ballot for the constitutional amendment, if you can give us some information on that. And board members, I will just tell you that Representative Garrison at Fleming Island is the one that's sponsoring that legislation. So, I would encourage you to send him a message just explaining what our job duties are and what our roles are, and why we are no less important than they are. So Mr. McInnes, if you could do that for me, I would appreciate it. And so with that, we'll move on down to section 16 will be 2-minute public comment. And then we'll go around the board. Rita, do you want to introduce who's sitting right beside you, please?
Yes, this is Julie Berry. She's been my right arm now for many years, and she will fill the gap when I leave until a permanent person is found. And I cannot say enough good things about her. She's smart, she's helpful, she will take care of the school district.
Well, thank you, Julie. It's good to have you here. Would you like to say anything? Would you like to say anything?
I'm just happy to help. That's something I want to be able to do to help the district through
Right.
this time, and I appreciate all of you and any support.
Right.
Everybody's been wonderful.
Well, I will just say thank you for stepping up and being a team player. What you're doing is absolutely quintessential of being a team player, and so we appreciate that. Dr. Hale, Ms. Lightboard, Mr. Horton, anything else? All right, this meeting's adjourned.